Are you a real DJ yet?
Ooh, that's a tough one. What is a real DJ? What is a real DJ? It's interesting for me because when I think real DJ, I picture like a headline concert, Fred again, Dom Dollar, like Tiesto. I think of Foreverland in Europe, but I think for what we do as wedding DJs, we're in a category called open format DJing, where it's a lot more, it's less about a structured set and more about reading the room and seeing what the crowd wants. And I think a lot of what we do is a little bit different.
It's a different beast, totally.
It's a different beast, but I guess I would say, yeah, I am a real DJ. I'm not a producer and I'm not doing festivals, but I think now, the first year I felt like an imposter and I was waiting for that first gig where I was going to like drop the ball and then you guys would never book me again and my reputation be ruined. And that never happened. But I think, especially in the last 6 months, I see myself as a DJ now, and I've got, 100, 200 gigs later. I feel like I know what I'm doing at this point.
Yeah. I think that when it comes to like, what do you think a DJ is? Like those people that you started off with, Dom Dollar and all those guys, they're like the 1% of the 1%. I mean, they are I guess it's like the standard curve, like the very, very top people. They're usually quite in the category of like unicorns. And then the most visible as well, especially in Australia with the EDM kind of scene. It makes sense that you mentioned all those names. I tend to think of wedding DJs, open format DJs, which to me includes clubs because they are very similar nowadays. You've got to be able to like change and pivot and all that sort of stuff, depending on the situation. There are places where you go, where you just walk in, it's one type of music and that's all it is for the whole night. Like D&B type stuff. If you go into a D&B place, that's all you're supposed to play. If you start popping out Macarena and stuff like that, they are not having it. So the cool thing about it though is that like if you have an interest, whatever it is, whether it's D&B, say for example, you do get the opportunity to play that inside of that space, the open format space. I think the biggest difference between the two genres, like say a festival DJ and an open format / wedding DJ, is the adaptability. It's huge. Like we all know the example. I've got a friend who works at a club. He's going to be my wedding DJ, and they, like you say, generally speaking, the sets are pretty formulated, and what they're known for is what they do. So there's not really that much flexibility. And to be honest, it's a hard concept to understand if you're not used to open format. Like when you walk in and you're an EDM DJ, it's like, whoa, what's going on? Why aren't these people reacting to this banger that I drop every week at a club? So it can be. How have you found that though?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think sometimes I get asked as well. People go, "Oh, what kind of DJ are you? Are you a house DJ? Are you a drum and bass DJ?"
They want to put you in a box.
They want to put you in a box, and I think to some degree I could step into that environment. I don't know if they could step into the open format space as easy, because for what we do, you have to have such a broad song knowledge that you need to be able to pop out like a mini set of 20, 30, 40 minutes in all of these genres. You need to know R&B, you need to know pop, you need to know 80s rock, you need to know 90s hip hop. Like you've got to have a little bit of all of that to draw from. That being said, I definitely have my favorite genres. I love my EDM, I love my R&B. That's my bread and butter for what I do, if it's up to me. But ultimately, I think as an open format DJ, you got to give the dance floor what they want and what the client wants.
So do you feel like that's, at a certain point, does it feel like you're selling out to, like, say, so if your preference is EDM, R&B, when you don't play those genres, do you feel like you're a little bit of a sellout?
Yeah, a little bit. I think everyone feels that way, but I think that's also just the nature of being a professional. A lot of people, if you're a doctor, you might have a specific form of medicine that you enjoy or you're interested in or that you nerd out on in your spare time, but ultimately you do what you have to do. And same with a school teacher or whatever, you might like one area of science, but ultimately you've got to go across that. So it is a little bit selling out, but I think too, it depends on how you view the process. For me in weddings, I like to say there's three kinds of people that I've seen in this industry. There's the people that love their craft. So I might love photography, I might love being a celebrant, I love being a DJ, I enjoy the transitions, I make myself smile with some of the things I do for fun. Then you've got category number 2, which is you love making people happy on the best day of their lives. And that for me, I get a real kick out of. And then the third one is you're just in it for the money. And you've got to be a little bit of all three.
Do you think when you say when you're in it for the money, do you think it's like, is that the same as saying you treat it like a business?
Yeah, it's commercial. It's a transaction. And sometimes, like, you know, when I rock up and I go, this is going to be a cruisy gig. I've done this time before. I don't think the crowd's going to be particularly fun. But at the end of the day, I'm getting paid to eat nice food in a fancy place and create a nice atmosphere for these people. Then I accept that for what it is and I enjoy it. Is it selling out? I don't know.
I think if it's easy, sometimes you can mistake that for kind of like not caring. Because sometimes you get to the point, especially in Perth, like there is a threshold. I always talk about the threshold. Once you're over the threshold, it's kind of everything else is window dressing, if you know what I mean. Like, I think for a lot of people, people in our industry, if you can perform to a certain standard, then it gets really easy, especially through repetition. And sometimes that repetition can be mistaken as like not caring. So it's kind of you play mental gymnastics to kind of justify what you're doing. Like for me, I'm closer to the third where I'm just about the transaction, but there are elements of it to where I feel really like I enjoy it when I see, especially an older person that just loses themselves. They disappear. Like they're 65, 70, 75, 80. They're in the middle of a mosh pit at 11:30 at night at a wedding. It's like, when are you ever going to see that? And a lot of times, I always talk about this too, when people will see like their nonna in the middle of like a Prodigy, you know, dance song, and they're like, I didn't even know this person could walk. Like I've seen that so many times, and that's what I get a kick out of it. So it kind of, I guess throughout the night it can change where you walk in, you know, like you say, you walk into a job, you're like, oh, here we go. This looks like meat and potatoes to me. But then as you start to see the personalities of the people emerge throughout the night, you're like, oh, that person, they've reacted in a certain way, you know, tapping their toes.
And I think that's what keeps me in the game, because ultimately most of the nights you're not playing the exact music you want. Sometimes there's that overlap, but a lot of the time it's the experience that you're creating and providing for other people. It's, you know, it's the funny moment. As like I told you this story the other week, if I had one of the grandpas needed to get wheeled out. And so I put on, move, Dick, get out the way. And everywhere, like the dance floor parted, he came through and he was just laughing on that wheelchair. And I was like, for me, that was like a highlight of the year in terms of dance floor moments. And it wasn't about the song. It wasn't about like the overall night. It's just like you have these little moments along the way that it just makes it all worthwhile.
I think sometimes, you know, with DJing and stuff, especially with the kind of the culture around, just in general, culture in general, I think a lot of times older people feel disregarded by the current nature of the culture. So when you do something that acknowledges their presence, they're like, oh, I'm someone in this whole grand scheme of things. So I think that's why I like doing the older crowds as well, especially. It's probably something to do with my age as well. So yeah, having those moments, and even I guess that's part of the skill of managing open format events, is having the skill to understand that this could be an opportunity, like you say, to have the highlight of the year. But a lot of times, if you're just set in your ways and how you do things, you don't see those opportunities.
I think it helps to throw yourself in the deep end a little bit and take a risk and try something new. And so I love with some of the work I've done with Envy, where I'll have these strange niche corporate gigs where I've had to come up with certain sound effects, or an awards night, or I've had to do like a 50-year-old's engagement or wind-up party or something, and the entire crowd is not my demographic at all. Nothing that I listen to is what they listen to, and I'm having to learn a whole new genre of music to make it through that night. Now, I'm super stressed going into that event, but afterwards, if it went well, and often it does, now I've got a whole new notch on my belt, something in my repertoire, and ultimately it keeps it interesting when you are challenging yourself in that way.
Yeah, I mean, a similar thing that I do is sometimes I'll burn all the kind of standard songs that you would expect to be played at a wedding. I'll burn them early in the night so that I really have to think about what I'm doing. And to be honest, it's kind of scary at the time when I'm, you know, like, I don't know, I want to dance with someone. If you burn that at like 7:30, then you're like, wow, that was, as far as wedding go in this particular marketplace, that's a huge song. So like, you're gonna have to start thinking. So there's things that you can do to kind of keep it interesting as well. I think obviously the crowds and the diversity of kind of guests that you have at your events is another thing to kind of, yeah, it's almost like a morbid curiosity where you're trying to do stuff to self-sabotage just to take yourself to another level. So I, as someone who's been in it for quite a long time, I find myself doing that a lot more often now. It is definitely different. So with the wedding numbers, you've been with us probably 2 years now, you reckon?
Yeah, 2 years doing the DJing, yeah.
And I'd say it's like we were talking about this earlier. Probably you're sitting as far as the team that works with us, you're probably easily in the top 3 of the guys that go-to guys. How have you found the pressure, or I don't know how you would describe it, but how have you found that rise? Because 2 years is actually quite a short time, especially since you were literally didn't even own a DJ controller or a DJ setup. How have you found that?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I think because of how many events I've done, like it didn't sort of start slowly. I started out doing like...
We probably pushed you into it, right?
Yeah. I started out as like the relief teacher DJ. I covered a few people's gigs who couldn't make it, or I think Karen at the time, he had to go on an army trip or something for work, and suddenly he needed someone to take on a bunch of his gigs, and that's kind of what threw me into the deep end. I think fortunately I was able to swim and not sink because I had been to a lot of weddings before that, and so for what I lacked in perhaps DJ experience, I had in wedding experience. But it's been pretty incredible, and I think sometimes I'm quite an impatient person. You know, when I find something I like, I sort of almost autistically get obsessed with it. You know, I'll binge watch all the YouTubes, I'll watch podcasts, and when I started taking it seriously, I went and watched you and Adam do a bunch of gigs, and I was like, now I'm the old school R&B DJ because I'll copy Eden's game, you know?
Yeah, it's an interesting, I think the thing that I find most satisfying about open format DJing while we're on it is it's the psychology, the social psychology of it all, the social engineering, right? I mean, there was a time in early 2000s, mid 2000s, where I actually used to look out into the crowd. This is when I was doing nightclubs, and I'm like, I'm gonna make those two hook up, and like with the music, you could sculpt a situation in which that would happen. You could have like a whole bunch of dudes go crazy on the dance floor, you know, like playing moshing. Rage Against the Machine back then was one of the songs that I used to play pretty much at every gig that I go to. And the ability to craft it where like say you'd start the peak point where everyone just goes crazy, I'd start probably 15-20 minutes building it up to that situation where they don't really know what's going on. Like, you know, we talk about waves and all that sort of stuff. Something that I've actually gone back to, because when I was really deep into DJing and open format and weddings and just events in general, I used to have the up and down, and I noticed I moved away from that where everything was trying to go up energy wise, which is it's okay to do it that way. There's nothing wrong with it, but I found, and I've gone back to it recently, where I've started to do slower songs in the middle of it, and it's been interesting. It actually came from a client. She's like, oh, I don't want to just have, you know, constantly trying to raise the energy to the point where everyone explodes. I don't mind having that crescendos and all that sort of stuff, the builds and the drop-offs, you know, the slow lovey-dovey dances and things like that. So, and that goes back to that social psychology, that social engineering of it. Now, you've got a marketing background. Do you have the same experiences?
Yeah, definitely. I think that is the real key to open format DJing and doing events. Is it's reading the room and reading the dance floor, but it is actually exactly what you said, of being mindful of all these different things going on of managing energy levels on the dance floor. I think it's huge. You know, you can build up to like 128, 130 BPM. You get people jumping up and down. You can go to drum and bass and send people crazy, but you'll wear them out and you'll lose them. They'll go grab a drink at the bar. They'll start going outside because it's hot. And then it's almost like riding those waves of being like, okay, I'm going to give people a rest and give them some sing-alongs. Or I'm going to give them a bit of like slow, sexy time R&B dancing.
Huggies, you know, like even giving the chances. Like I've started playing Lady in Red, Careless Whisper. I've started playing them as not just Rick Rolls, but I've started to bring them back as just songs where it's like, okay, we've been going off. You know, the kids have been sitting on 120 to 128 BPMs for the last 30 minutes. Let's drop out for a second and just do something crazy now. And I have noticed there's been the couples coming back and like looking over, thumbs up. Kind of cheesy for me personally, but then I kind of get it as well. They're like, finally someone that's just not going to sit on that 125 kind of range for the whole night, which is really, for me, it's a step back into how I used to DJ as well. So, and I find that interesting in itself because the whole psychology of what I'm just doing that. So you've had a whole bunch of different opportunities as far as the type of jobs that you've had. How have you found carving out your identity as a DJ? Because you are, in my opinion, you're probably one of the higher level MCs as well. So how have you kind of crafted your position in the whole DJ open format wedding DJ kind of space?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think to what we've talked about in the past, like I started out probably a better MC than I was DJ, and because I'd done public speaking in the past. But ultimately, I think you have to be the full package. You know, I think I had to let my DJing catch up. I wanted the experience in those different environments, you know, with teenagers at school balls to awards nights, corporate events.
They're all stepping stones, right? Because we kind of think of a school ball, for example, or even sometimes corporate jobs. We think of them as a night off because it's so easy compared to the stress levels of a wedding. Not to say that all of them aren't like that. You know, we've done the Ray White stuff where they're actually quite particular about how they operate. But once you understand what they want, it's so much fun. And I think when it comes to the open format wedding DJ kind of space, the cool thing about being an awesome MC and an awesome DJ is that if you're having an off night on one or the other one can save you. So, and I've had that. Like, you know, you just like by your own standards, and you probably know this now. What used to be you're like, oh, this is a smash. I killed it. This was awesome wedding. It's kind of like nowadays it's like, oh, I've had something even better happen than that. So how have you gone dealing with that? Because as you get better, it's like your own internal standards get higher and higher.
I think I remember at the start I used to, when I had a night that I didn't feel went well, it was like, oh, you know, was it them or me? Whereas now it's a bit, I have a bit more clarity around that because you know you get the experience in.
So what do you think it is often?
What is? Oh, I think these days it's more the crowd because I think I've got a pretty good read on. If I understand the demographic, I know what they're going to like and I can kind of feed them what they want for most of the night. Sometimes I'm off. But for the most part, you know, it just comes down to who's there. Do they want to party? How warm is the room? The temperature of the room, the crowd to room space as well. That's it. Like sometimes you get a huge venue and a tiny little dance floor and it's just always going to feel empty and people are self-conscious or maybe the lighting's off. There's so many variables.
Name two venues. For me, it's Hillary's Yacht Club. That's got a I don't know if you've been there. It's got a massive dance floor space, massive seating area. The bar's quite a distance away as well. That dynamic of the space is like, you've got to take that into effect. There'll be like jobs I won't take just for that specific reason. Like sometimes the Cabernet room at the Vines, it can be a little bit sketch just because there's like access to the outside area right there. So people end up people watching. And if the worst part is that, you know, if the couple goes out and they're smokers and they stay out there all night, we've talked about this heaps of times, energy goes wherever the couple goes.
Yeah, that's big. Yeah, smokers are always rough for that reason because it's just the logistics of the venue. They actually can't be on the dance floor and smoke, so you're going to lose people.
The estate room at Sandalford's is similar too. Like, you can have 200 people in there, and then have 30 people on the dance floor just because.
Sandalford's a great example because it's an incredible space, but if you're going into that room with less than 100 or 120 people, it's going to feel empty, and that affects the whole energy, everything.
I think I often say this to people. When the venue gives you a bigger space, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a higher value proposition. If you can keep people contained, like even so, we spoke about the estate room at Sandalford's. If you head across and you've got like 80 to 90 people, and you go into the oak room, that can be an awesome space for that as well, for that type of crowd. Yeah, definitely. And then, but the problem is, then you've got the courtyard. So if the aircon isn't working too flash, or maybe you're a little bit too loud for the crowd, they can easily eject, and then you can end up with 15 people on the dance floor as well. So it's, like I said, it goes back to that.
The physical space is hard, and I think too, one of the things that you're probably the same. More than raising the standard for myself is because I do have a benchmark of what an incredible night is now. It makes me not want to do the not so good venues, or if I know a gig's not going to be very good because of either sound restrictions or the way the room's laid out or any of those kind of factors, it definitely lowers my expectation. And there is something to be said about your expectation for the night. And one of the reasons I always try to really put quite a bit of time into chatting to my couples before the wedding is because when I do that, I'm psyching myself up for a good night. Because sometimes, I don't know about you, but you can almost will things to happen. Like when I'm really in the zone, I'll get out on the dance floor myself. I'll start rallying around people, or I'll you can come in with a level of expectation and enthusiasm, and often you find that the night raises to the level of expectation.
The worst part is when you're stressed out about a night and how it's going to go, and then you get to the night and it's awesome. You're like, God damn it.
all that mental burden I came in with. And
I tell you, for the last probably half dozen jobs where I've had that kind of feeling of like, I don't know how this is going to go. I'm a bit worried about it. I'm stressed out. And they've all been awesome. And it's the worst feeling. It's like, why was I so stressed? And, it wasn't the big deal I thought it was.
Nerves and excitement feel almost exactly the same. And I'm glad I realized that almost 10 years ago when I was at uni doing some public speaking, but I started to realize that butterflies I felt was actually like an adrenaline rush of excitement, because I get that at almost every time I MC, every time the first 10 minutes of the dance floor, it's always like that. All right, I got to try keep as many people.
You've got 3 songs in the bag where the dance floor's going to be full. It's that third song where you're like, okay, let's see how we go.
That's it. Yeah, that's actually really rough. Hey, it's like dealing with that 20-minute drop off after people have danced. You got all the freebies out of the token. We're going to stay here. Yeah. Oh yeah. Don't get me started on run sheets. All right, maybe we should pivot off DJing a little bit. I was thinking, DJing's obviously a massive part of what both you and I do, but it's not a life for everybody. I think it's very glamorous. I'm so grateful I get paid to party with people, essentially. However, it's late nights. It's physically quite demanding. You're literally standing for 10, 12 hours straight, and you're always working Fridays, Saturdays. I haven't had a Friday, Saturday off in almost 4 months. And everyone else in my life works typically a 9 to 5. And it's funny, I when I was working 9 to 5, all I wanted to do was escape the 9 to 5. Then I escaped the 9 to 5, work every weekend, have a cool life during the week. And now I find myself wanting the 9 to 5 again, because it's nice to be in sync with everyone. But I know you've had some thoughts on changing up the pace, but...
Yeah, the DJ life is really good. I mean, when I first came to WA, I vowed never to go into the mining industry, because I just thought the lifestyle kind of a FIFO worker was crazy. Family life balance, doing those massive, and then you've come to find out you can make just as much on the weekend being a really high level wedding DJ, especially. That these guys make in 2 weeks, you can do in 2 days, really, and essentially now. Maybe not so much when I first got here. I mean, the rates when I first got here were anything from $750 to kind of $1,200, $1,300. That was the standard rate across the industry. Now it's probably starting at about 12 on the lower end of the people who are doing more than 30 weddings a year, up to I think 3.5. I mean, we've got packages that we do that are around the $8,000 mark. So it's been an interesting shift, especially over the last few years as, I don't know, is it Gen Z? Like the people who are brought up on the internet and stuff and social media, as they enter the marketplace as creators, as DJs and things like that, I've noticed there's been a change in expectations, deliverables and all that sort of stuff, just because I think the younger generation are a lot more savvy, and they don't buy into, like, you know, I've been in the game for ages, they don't buy into that anymore. They're just like, well, what can you do? Let's say you've got to have your social media game, your marketing's got to be on point, your communication is a big deal now. Used to be, I never met with probably 98% of the couples that I used to work with. The first time I'd meet them was on the day as they're coming into the room. And now it's closer to probably, I still probably don't meet in person 90%, but I'm doing the the Zoom calls and all that sort of stuff, personal phone calls and things like that. So it's a little bit different. So you're in the younger demographic. How are you finding that, just in general, not just DJing, but with everything else? Do you find it?
Yeah, I think we've almost come full circle a little bit. I think everyone was jumping online, and then for a while you had like almost that party celebrity culture come in. But these days, like, Hollywood's gone. Like, there's no blockbuster movie. Like, since COVID, like a famous A-grade actor where you watch every movie they put out, that doesn't exist anymore. People watch TV series. And I think because we all spend so much time online, there was a time when we wanted that, but I think there's like a return to, actually, we're all just longing to hang out in person, in community. And I saw a stat the other day. It was like, apparently for the Zoomers, like Gen Z, like, whereas you used to meet up and go for a drink with friends, now they like meet up and go for a run club, or go lift weights together. And there's almost like a health conscious, we need community because our life is so digital, and so just sitting in front of a screen, it's like we're craving something a little bit different. And I definitely think there's a cultural shift, and everyone's a lot more niche now because the internet gives you an algorithm of exactly what you're into. And so I think pop culture doesn't really exist in the same way. It's now like, what little tribes are you a part of? And then I guess as a DJ, it's like, well, am I going to be able to resonate with those different tribes? And that can be challenging.
Yeah, I think the Big C was a wake-up call for a lot of people in terms of like what's important. So me and my wife talk about this all the time. Whereas I used to be like, oh, just go out, make money, and then she would take care of the household and things like that, which would kind of be called misogynist type of behavior now, patriarchal and all that sort of stuff. It's just an old school mentality. And I think now, where she used to be all about experiences and, let's go and do this, let's go and do that. And I noticed when COVID came along, people started to reassess what's more valuable to them when they've had time to actually stop, breathe, take a rest from the system, right? And I think that's why people are more inclined, especially younger people, for them to want to have experiences. It's quite, for me, as a nearly 50-year-old, to see young kids who are under 25 wanting to go on, like you say, go for a run. But it's not just the run that they want, the physical benefits, but it's the interactions with a human being. It has been interesting to kind of notice that stuff. And I think a lot of the times, going back to music and stuff, when you're really good at, say, open format and in the wedding space, it's because the songs that you play can relate to experiences as well, where they're like, oh, this is a song, like. I
think that's a real key, and that's something I ask my couples always, is what was nostalgic for you growing up? Or what's the song that when you and your like friends or your bridal party listen to that like just sets you off? Because when you hit that spot, you get responses unlike anything else.
Mid-2000s and the kind of mid-2010s is going off its nuts at the moment. Like, I'm asking my daughter at the moment, she's 24, and she's like, 26, and she's talking about like Miley Cyrus and all those Disney kind of Nickelodeon type stuff from when she was a kid, and she's like, oh, these are the songs that I used to like as a kid. I'm playing those at weddings now, like more than I would expect. They've come back really, really hard. Like High School.
I was about to say High School Musical. At least, I don't know if it's a TikTok thing. The last 2 months That's been like the thing everyone wants. That and like Hannah Montana. And the funny thing is, it's not teenagers asking you for this. It's like a 32-year-old male.
Yeah. I noticed that, like when they're all singing the lyrics in unison, and I'm like, oh snap! I did not realize. And I think it just harks back to I do a calculation. I'm all about algorithms and calculations and all this sort of stuff. That's how I operate personally. So I'm going like, hey, if they're 32 now, what was the music that was transformational during their kind of formative years as a teenager, early adult? So now I'm working back like 14 years to when they're like 17, 18, 19, kind of that time frame, which is taking me back to, like I said, mid 2000s, early 2010s. And then I'm just going through like the top 100 lists and just picking out the songs that I think match the crowd. And it's kind of like a little algorithm that I have in my head, and it's interesting because then you're getting back to that Miley Cyrus, Hannah Montana, and all the High School Musical. A lot of Disney stuff is going off its nut again. There was a time when there were just kind of the weirdo kind of, let's be honest, brides that were into Disney. But it's becoming more and more common now.
You know what's funny about it too is like you would never see this. I mean, I think you are starting to see it maybe in clubs. I'm not really in that environment now, but I will like chuck out like the Disney song or the High School Musical after like a punk rock song or after like a drum and bass song. It's like, because it's and the thing is, it's the crowd's not shocked. If anything, like they're happy by it. You know, it's like I've done that before. It's almost like the Dancing Queen bait and switch. You know, and but you put out like, you know, they're about to hit the drop, and then it goes into High School Musical. And at first, some people are frustrated because they're ready for the drop, and then other people, when they realize, they're like, yeah.
Yeah, I think, and that's what, going back to like where I started out, it's that social engineering that I like the most. So when you do something like that, you're like intentionally, okay, it's a little bit risky maybe, but when you pull it off, it's like, yeah, big time payoff.
I think that becomes the reward that keeps what we do sustainable, is when it's the joy you get from seeing kind of like that social engineering, and then kind of like sharing in the moment with people. I think as a DJ, one of the key skills, and even as an MC as well, is you got to be really empathetic. And what I mean by empathy is to understand, when I play this song, what are people going to do with their body? How's it going to make them feel? What place is it going to bring them back to in their memories? Or when I say my introduction with the MC thing, and I tell everyone to give away some hugs, you know, what's that actually going to do to the energy in the room? And I think when you can be in that headspace, it's almost like choreography, the whole event from start to finish.
Yeah, I think it's like when you work a room and you kind of set it up for success, there's a lot to be said for doing that. You can go in kind of cold and just, you know, work off a rote system that you always use. And I've been down that road before. I've tried so many different things, you know, and I think the important thing now is actually to keep in line with the trends and kind of staying a little bit ahead of the curve. You can't go too far ahead of the curve, especially in a place like WA, where if you're too far ahead of the curve, you're a weirdo. And that doesn't really go down with most crowds. But if you're kind of on the edge of like stepping into unknown territory, but still in sync with the crowd that's in front of you, I think that's the fine balance that I'm finding at the moment that I really enjoy. It's treading those lines. But then, you know, if it's emceeing that we're talking about, it's always having those outs, you know, oh, whoops, maybe I'm a little bit too early on this, or, you know, tough crowd tonight, things like that. It's having those built-in systems into what you're doing, so that if you crash and burn, at least it's a laugh for everyone. Well,
you got to be able to laugh it off. And even when you stuff up a mix, you know, because I've done that before, and I'm just like, I don't like say it over the mic, but I'm like, that was dog. You know, like, and I let people see my facial expression. I'm like, oh, what can you do? And the thing is too, like you at the end of the day, you're a live performer. People they're not watching a pre-recorded track. And I think sometimes the failures and the hiccups, it's all part of it, right? And rather than like kind of panicking and stressing out, you just got to laugh it off. And
yeah, sometimes acknowledging what's happening in front of you is just like the biggest relief you can do. Like my advice to, oftentimes when I get MCs, like it's a friend, family friend, or someone who, you know, they do it as part of their work. The best, and I picked this up from a couple of corporate guys. their thing was don't try and be perfect. And I noticed that when I started going out there when it comes to MC duties and doing what I do, it didn't stress me out as much. I'm like, oh, if you make a mistake, just like, oops, screwed that up. But we'll carry on. It's kind of like you don't have to have an out or a little, quirky thing to say every time you do something weird. You can just say it is what it is type of thing. And the crowd just, the advice I got was don't try and be perfect. Because the minute you stop trying to be perfect, the stress disappears and you just kind of flow. You get in that flow state a lot easier, I've found. When you combine that with the amount of repetitions and times you've done things over and over again, putting little twists so that, the best way to get variety is to go to the same venue 2 nights in a row. Just the second night you're like, the staff have heard all of this stuff before, so now you got to change it up a little bit. You can do the same mixes. Let's be honest, sometimes weddings can be quite repetitive no matter who the DJ is. So when you do something a little bit odd and different, it keeps it interesting for the venue staff as well. They're like, oh, you are a little bit different. Or even like some of my friends, like we were talking about Jack from Lamont. If you do the same mix in 2 nights, he'll be like, bro. Yeah, bro. Have I heard that mix before? It's like, shut up.
Very true. I think you got to keep it fresh for the people that work there, for yourself. You got to keep it interesting and challenge yourself, because it is yeah, you're right. It can be repetitive, but I also find in taking those risks and doing things different, I think, if you're saying like me getting thrown into this world of weddings and what's been like a bit of a quick rise, I think it comes down to the fact that I have taken risks, and I'll bring out some songs that maybe other DJs won't, or I'll try something from an MC point of view, because if you make it different, then it becomes memorable. And I always talk to couples about this. I'm like, you want a wedding to feel novel. You want it to feel like not like another wedding. If your wedding feels like exactly like your friend's wedding from 2 months prior, because everyone's getting married at the same time, it kind of takes away from it. So if there's things you can do to make it uniquely you, whether that's a certain nostalgic song, whether it's a funny little game or some sort of activity or moment in your wedding that makes it unique, then you can have a 8 or 9 or 10 out of 10 day, or 10 out of 10 dance floor, rather than like a safe 7 out of 10, Yeah,
I think you've got to be comfortable with taking those risks as well. Like some people, the stress of doing it is why they don't do it. And I think the people that I follow the most that have helped me understand the stand-up comedians, like the way that they build their sets is repetition, right? And then they get to the point where they can kind of get into flow state. They've got all these pre-made set lists of jokes that they do. And I kind of build it off the same way. And then when I want to go freestyle, I'll freestyle and just make stuff up as the night's going. But if it kind of, if it's not really hitting the way that I want it to hit, then you can go back to that kind of pre-canned stuff as well, where it's kind of fun, still interesting and all that, but it's kind of safe as well. So having a little bit of both, I think, is like we said, being a chameleon and being able to adjust on the fly, because there's people in our crew that if things change just a little bit with how they've scheduled it and planned it, they don't deal well with it, and we give them certain types of clients that matches that type of requirement as well. Like we've got an example would be Adrian. Adrian is like highly organized, everything's set. He's probably got everything locked down a month before his events, whereas I'm the week of I'm calling you up on a Monday or a Wednesday even, and the wedding's on a Saturday, just because for me personally, I'm like, I know that sometimes planners and venues and coordinators can't actually get the information to me in time because the couples they're busy. Like it's a pretty stressful job trying to plan a wedding. So I kind of realized that the last week is probably the best time to actually meet up. That's why I leave it for so late.
I think it saves you having multiple conversations doing the same, because you're better off you can give some, you do a bit of planning with the music in terms of the couple can send you some songs, some playlists of things they're interested in, but really you don't want to lock everything in until everything else is logged in, because otherwise you're just going to have an unnecessary amount of back and forth. And I agree with you. I think nothing ever truly goes to plan on a wedding day, and I think for me at least, I have 2 or 3 things that are really important. It's is the main course, when does that come out? Because if that doesn't come out on time, it can push back everything else. Number 2, we need to get the dance floor open in time, because otherwise it feels like the party was cut short. I think that's really important. Another one is, and this has been huge for me recently, is I have to have that 15 to 30 minute gap between when dinner and speeches and the last formalities end and when I open the dance floor. And I find that when I do that, I've been able to keep maybe an extra 10-20% of people on the dance floor, because you kind of you build the vibe. It's like the pre-game, and then by the time you actually open the dance floor, because you've ramped it a little bit, you can just keep them all there.
Yeah, when I watch yours, I think what sets the foundation for your nights is the emceeing at the start of the night. Like, that's what I've found. I know that you probably work the venue staff and things like that as well, and the other vendors. I think for me, when I watch your stuff, that's one of the things that I notice the most, is that your pre-work, as far as heading outside, talking to couples, bridal party, wedding parties, all that sort of stuff, getting them primed really sets you up for success. If you can put a little bit of work into that kind of priming phase of the night, everything else seems to flow a lot better. I've found, like, especially when you get laughs and people are laughing at the little jokes that you make while you're talking to them, couples and things like that, before they actually come into the room. It kind of sets you at ease. You're like, okay, we've got the vibe set.
Yeah, you're right. It's almost like, I think as the even when you're not emceeing and you're just the DJ, you still are coordinating the reception. Like, you've still got to coach the MC, you still got to be on top of the timeline, but you're setting the culture and the atmosphere for the entire evening. And sometimes weddings or events that have zero structure, there's zero formalities, are actually really hard, because it's harder to set the pace. People are waiting for something to happen to let them know that this is how I get to behave. And I think sometimes when you MC, you can do that. Like, you can set the tone of, hey, this is going to be fun and a little bit silly tonight. You don't have to care what everyone thinks. You can let your guard down a little bit and be a bit of an idiot. Yeah. And I think it makes a big difference. One thing I want to ask you about, I learned from yourself and Adam, and I think looking back now, I find DJing has come to me pretty easy, like in terms of being a wedding DJ, but I think it's because of certain personality traits I have or other life experiences. And then I obviously had good people to learn from. But what do you look for in terms of people that will be a great wedding DJ? Because it's not for everyone, and it is actually, when you think about it, it's actually very stressful, and some people don't cope with it as well. So what do you think are, like, if someone's thinking about becoming a DJ or an open format DJ, what are you looking for? I
think the biggest trait that I kind of look for is adaptability. Get the job done no matter what. Because like you said, weddings never really go to plan. I always say, as a kind of joke, that I'll get one or two weddings a year that run perfectly to the schedule that's been planned. I always tell people, give yourself 15, 20 minutes, 10, 15, maybe even 20 minutes of variation within a timeline. So if you're a person that likes rigid times, for example, weddings is not the game for you. If you're a person that your ego is easily hurt, especially, that can be a massive obstacle, because to be honest, people live their lives, they're doing what they're doing. Sometimes they come to work and work as a job. It's not a place to interact and have fun and meet people. So you've got to take into account different people's personalities. Working with some hospitality staff, retail staff, things like that, they're notoriously kind of not the people that are particularly interested in doing the best job possible. Then, not to single them out, but it's just facts. And so if you can't deal with people who aren't interested in making the night awesome, whereas that's your whole goal for the night, that's something that you got to learn to manage. I always say that weddings are all about people and personalities. Weddings would be awesome if humans weren't involved in them. Like, it's just, you've got vendors, you've got yourself to worry about, you've got the guests to worry about. There's a dynamics. Is there a family situation going on? There's all sorts of things that you have to manage and be comfortable doing with that. Just even confronting a situation, like, during the pre-meeting, hey, let's talk about parents.
Yeah, you got split families, and this person hates that person, and they can't sit near each other. And
Dad's passed away, Mum's not here any longer. So how do you handle that when you bring it up? Oh, Dad passed away 2 months ago. There's a couple of ways you could go like, oh my God, or it's like, oh, I'm so sorry, carry on. So it's just, and I think my thing is to do whatever comes to my head naturally, like what feels the right thing to say. I'll just say, oh man, that's dumb. Or like now that my parents, my dad passed away this year, it's an easy subject for me to even more now. So there's all these little things you've got to have an awareness of what can happen. And I think when you get your reps up, you start to see these situations reoccur over and over again, and then you develop a repertoire of ways that you can communicate. Oh, if a parent passed away, oh, that's so sad.
It is challenging. I think I had a very unique sort of entrance into the industry in terms of I kind of got thrown in the deep end, which is good, and it forced me to swim. I think it would be very hard for someone to just start out new in this space, because how do you, it's like when they say when you enter the job market, it's like everyone's looking for experience, but how do you get experience until you have a job? And it's very much like that with being a wedding DJ. You can't be a wedding DJ until you've DJed a wedding. And there's nothing that's even comes close to it, because a wedding's completely different from a school ball. A wedding's completely different from a corporate event. It's completely different from a club. And so, I mean, I guess the best thing I ever did was go and shadow another DJ.
Yeah, I think depending on the background and type of jobs, I go on intuition and gut feelings a lot of the times when I meet people or I see them online. The way you answer questions is, if you've been around the block, no matter what you do, whether you're a stay-home mum or a stay-home dad, or you're just someone who's always in the corporate environment, you start to get a read on people, just generally speaking. And oftentimes your intuition towards how people are is usually pretty right. I think I heard this saying the other day, well, not a saying, but I heard someone say that the first thing to develop with a human is the stomach, and that's why you should always trust your gut feelings. I don't know if that's actual fact, but biologically that's what this person was saying. Probably a Joe Rogan episode, knowing me. And that's why I'm leaning more and more so into how I feel rather than what I hear. Because as talk's cheap. Anyone can talk cheap. It also, I think you have to have an understanding of like social psychology to a certain degree, where you can translate what you're feeling into like something logical that gives you a framework to understand another person. A lot of times people who don't get other people who have no the ability to read feedback and all that sort of stuff, it's just because everything's self-focused. Whereas if you can reach out and have it take a multifaceted approach to something, meaning you can see something from your perspective, my perspective, vendor perspective, couple's perspective, and all that sort of stuff, and being able to evaluate that really quickly, ideally you come up with a solution and things like that. So there's ways that you can kind of pick up on those traits that people have. Just the ability to, like I say some pretty out of it, crazy, weird stuff. And a lot of the times it's just to amuse myself, but it's also to see how people react. And the reaction I get will be a read that I'll make about a person. It may be completely wrong, but it's just like, understanding how people's thought processes are. But then, to do that, you've got to have a framework of understanding. So I've got a little psychology thing in my background that I've kind of picked up on, that I use to assess situations and people. So it's helpful. Because you're right, it's not. There are people who couldn't think of a worse job than being in front of 120 strangers and talking. And here's the weird thing: I don't actually like public speaking. I just know how to do it. I remember the first kind of big technique I learned was
really interesting, because a lot of people they'll say I'm an extrovert. And maybe they say the same thing to you because they see you do something like public speaking. And for me, I've just done the reps, so I'm confident in that context. But actually, I'm a pretty introverted guy. And but you're right. It's a skill thing rather than an actual, I'm up there thriving in my element. You know what I
mean? Yeah. The technique I got, which kind of changed everything for me, was when I was working at nightclubs. We had to do like announcements, head over to the bar, we've got, drink specials going on, $10 for 2 shots or whatever. And the guy who I started out with, he's like, don't look at anyone. Look to the back of the room, project your voice to the back of the room, go to a soft focus so that you're not looking in and seeing anyone's faces. That's how I started off. And then, so I got that technique down. So I wasn't talking to anyone. I was talking to everyone, but no one at the same time. And then now it's refined for where I'm like, picking up things that people are doing in the crowd, and then as I'm scanning, I'm like, hey, this guy, he's not paying attention. What's going on over there?
And that's like the live comedian sort of heckler.
Yeah, and then you watch guys like Andrew Schultz, and things like that, who've got elite crowd game and stuff like that, and that's why I kind of look at comedians as far as the emceeing side of things, not necessarily to be a funny guy, but just the techniques that they use. Dave Chappelle, he's another guy. He's amazing storyteller and things like that. So I'm trying to.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing with public speaking that a lot of people miss, is that it's the sub-communication is more important than what you're actually saying, because you could say the exact things I say as an MC, and I think people might respond to it completely differently depending on how you deliver it, how you work the room, your voice tonality.
That's the thing, like you can say the same lines night after night. Some nights you're the funniest guy in Perth. The other nights you're like...
Yeah, it just drops. Yeah. No one's listening.
Got to build in text, like the recovery is like, oh, too early, too soon.
Yeah, yeah. You just got to own it.
It's like when I when R. Kelly and all those people that are getting cancelled and stuff like that is like, do I play this? Do I not play this? Some people will be like, yeah, I don't care. We can separate the artist from the music and all this sort of stuff. But lately with the whole P Diddy thing, it's like, oh my god, that's a massive part of the catalogue that's just been deleted pretty much. Yeah, so and that is, like I said, and going back to the start again, this is why I like the DJing. That's the part that I like the most. It's not necessarily the money, the lifestyle. For me, it's the social psychology, the social engineering. That's what keeps me. That's why I'm a marketing guy, because I love trying to figure out how's this person thinking, and then providing a solution to that question that I have in my head. So
it's something very very humanizing about the whole thing, and you really feel. There's a lot of emotionality in what we do, and it's a nice, because you get to you get to process it and be that engineer, be intentional, but it's a highly human environment, and you don't get that in a lot of other.
There's a lot of instant feedback as well. Like if something hits, like we were talking before, when they pop, or when they're just like, oh my god, you drop a song and on the drop, they just lose it.
It's like being naked. Yeah. DJing, because really, everything's happening in real time. You can't hide anything,
and people aren't afraid to judge you now. They're just like, what is this? Yeah. What are you doing? What are you like?
Everything's amplified. The sound's loud, so they'll hear every transition. The mic's on when you're speaking. If you're going to stutter, everyone's going to hear it. And
I think the other thing too, probably one of the most important things when you get into this game, and in any genre, no matter what you do, is that ability to change on the fly, because. If there's two ways to take it. You can either, if someone comes up and say, oh, what is this rubbish? You can lose your mind and say, what do you know? I'm a 1500 wedding DJ. I know everything about.
What are you at now? Probably like 3,000.
It's like, how many weddings have you been to? You can go down that road, or you can do what I do now. I'm like, oh, what do you think would go off right now? And honestly mean it. Sometimes I feel bad because they think I'm being cynical, but I'm honestly interested to hear what people think. Play something upbeat, play something we can all dance to, as there's 200 people on the dance floor, stuff like that. I'm like, okay, it's not any. I could be a dick and say, oh, turn around and look at the dance floor. You could say that. That's an easy out. Or you can say, well, what do you like? And then when you play their song, you might lose 15-20% of the crowd, but this one person, they're like, you're the man. And you're like, dude, I just lost a bit of a crowd, but now you think I'm the best DJ ever. That's what I mean by the social engineering. You got to play the game, and it doesn't necessarily mean winning all the time.
And you absolutely just cannot please everyone, and that's really the attitude you got to go in with. You got to know who's important, or you got to look after the majority, and that's kind of how you have to play it.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you realize that it's a team game, especially when you're going into an event and there's a whole bunch of vendors. I always say this as well, we're a team that's kind of trying to get the best result from everyone in our team. But overall, our goal is to serve the couple that have employed us. Yeah. And I think once you understand that and use that as a framework to communicate with vendors, guests, and things like that, it makes things a lot easier. And like you say, some people would, and I can easily understand it. I'm a pretty chill guy, but there's times when I'm like, this black belt that I've got, I wouldn't mind using it now. Yeah, I've had a few of those moments over the years. I haven't put my hands on anyone, really.
Sense of that. Classic. Oh, I think this is a pretty cool little conversation that would help someone who wants to get a bit more insight into open format DJing and what we're up to. But thanks for the chat and
invoices in the mail. The invoices in the mail.
This guy does nothing.
Don't you know who I am?
All right, let's actually, before we go, where can everyone find you on the socials? You've got a few things going on at the moment.
Yes, so yeah, Eden the DJ guy is my personal brand. That's to do with DJing and MCing and all that sort of stuff. DJ entertainment in Perth. The second would probably be Envy Event Group, which some people may mistake as my first thing. But yeah, so we're an entertainment provider. We do everything entertainment around weddings, corporate events. So, you know, obviously music, live music, sparklers, clouds, dance floors, photo booths. Well, yeah, saxophone. James is a killer, right? He's amazing. We've got a few dudes. Kieran's been awesome. I've worked with him a couple of times recently. We've got a few dudes on the books now. Tom Griebel, I know, is doing I think I might be doing a job with him. He's another killer. And then Mark Turner as well, as I think he's doing maybe a couple of jobs with us. He's an amazing Perth musician. Perth is really lucky as far as live music goes because of the Whopper, the students that come through there, and there's some super talented people. And then the third thing that I'm doing at the moment is the content creation, which is Eden the Creator on Instagram. So I've been doing a little bit of marketing, which obviously involves a little bit of video creation, and now I'm taking that to another level as far as trying to get out there in the space. Perhaps transition fully out of DJing and just do the jobs that I really, really like in that space. But yeah, I think Eden the Creator is probably where most of my efforts will be going in the next 12 months. And then that also ties over to the marketing business, which I'm kind of toying with the idea at the moment.
So hey, if people want to book you as a DJ, this might be the last few seats.
Yeah.
Those prices are going to go through.
Yeah, they will. They definitely will, because I want to price myself out, and I just want to do the jobs that I want to do. It's either come to me with a job that I want to do, or come to me with the money that I will be happy to take. One or the other. I have no qualms in saying what it is. But yeah, what about you? Because you're all over the place as well with multiple things going on.
Yeah, so the only social media I've got at the moment is Curtis Butcher, at Curtis Butcher. And curtisbutcher.com is where I've got everything. Try to keep it simple. But, you know, I've went through a bit of a identity crisis because I wasn't sure if I really wanted to be a DJ. I would really want to be a photographer, a media guy, or a real estate guy. And I'm also in the water industry and doing all kinds of things. So I think at the moment, I'm moving to this phase of wanting to do things like the podcast, have conversations like this, do a bit of vlogging, content creation, and I think I want to build community and help people online. I think DJing is going to always be a thing I want to keep doing, and I'm really owning that.
DJ will be financing those other projects, or is it a bit of a passion and financing, or is it how was that? How does that tie into everything?
Was financing, but now I think it's flipping. I think that DJing can just be a real passion thing. And I've also found too that I've done the same amount of volume this year in the last 12 months in terms of maybe 50, 80 events, maybe even more than that. But the workload has probably gone down by 30% because I've got systems and ways of following up, and just I've already got a backlog of sets and things that I can use. And I find that there's a lot less stress and management that goes into that. So that's actually allowed me to, you know, work another job. I've got sort of 3 businesses I'm running at the moment. And
it sounds like you're a systems guy. Like once you've got your systems in place, like there's obviously a little bit of creativity still within, like say DJing for an example, but you've systematized things to where you kind of understand structure and how everything goes. And every now and then you can sprinkle in a bit of creativity.
Yeah, that's it. I think that's probably the way I see myself is a bit of I'm a businessman and a systems guy first and foremost. And then second to that, I'm a creative. Yep. And finding the blend of both is really my sweet spot. And yeah, I think DJing gives me that, but it's only the weekends really. I got to do something during the week.
Yeah. It sounds like we're kind of shiny object guys, but not really.
I think that's just the hallmarks of an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. No, you're right there. Definitely.
I think we got to wrap it because this camera's going to run out of battery. So, places to be. Thanks, man. That was super awkward. Oh, glad we got that okay, right?